In a world where humanity fights for survival against relentless machines from space, Ark Raiders tells the story of resistance, sacrifice, and the thin line between hope and extinction. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. Ark Raiders isn't just another extraction shooter. It's a game with a narrative that runs deeper than most people realize. A story about what happens when Earth becomes a battlefield and ordinary people are forced to become extraordinary. The game takes place in an alternate future where our planet has been invaded by an alien force known as the Ark, massive mechanized entities that fell from the sky without warning and changed everything we knew about survival. These aren't your typical alien invaders. There's something far more terrifying. Machines that seem to have one purpose: harvest Earth's resources and eliminate anything that stands in their way. The Ark descended on Earth decades ago, transforming vast stretches of land into what survivors call the Ark zones, places where the machines have taken complete control and reshaped the environment to suit their unknown needs. Cities that once bustled with life now stand as hollow monuments to a world that no longer exists, their streets patrolled by mechanical nightmares that hunt any human foolish enough to venture inside. The initial invasion was catastrophic. Governments fell within weeks. Military forces were overwhelmed by the sheer scale and power of the Ark machines, and billions of people died in the first year alone. Those who survived did so by learning to hide, to scavenge, to fight only when absolutely necessary, and most importantly, to never underestimate the Ark. The machines aren't mindless drones. They adapt, they learn, they coordinate in ways that suggest a level of intelligence that terrifies even the most hardened survivors. Some believe the Ark are controlled by a central consciousness, a hive mind that directs every machine with perfect precision, while others think each unit possesses its own artificial intelligence that evolves based on its encounters with humans. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the Ark are winning. Humanity has been pushed to the brink, surviving in scattered settlements hidden in the few places the machines haven't fully claimed. Places like the Buried City, a massive underground refuge built from the ruins of what used to be a thriving metropolis. The Buried City is home to thousands of survivors who live in the shadows of their former world, cobbling together an existence from salvaged technology and whatever resources they can steal from the Ark zones. Life here is hard, food is scarce, medicine is a luxury, and every day brings the risk that the Ark will find them and wipe them out like they did to countless other settlements. But the people of the Buried City refuse to give up. They've organized themselves into raiding parties, groups of skilled fighters and scavengers who venture into the Ark zones to gather the technology and materials needed to keep their community alive. These raiders are the heroes of this story, ordinary men and women who risk everything to push back against the machines and give humanity a fighting chance. Each raider has their own story, their own reason for fighting. Some lost family in the initial invasion, others were soldiers who survived when their units were wiped out, and many are simply people who refuse to live on their knees. The game follows several key characters who represent different aspects of humanity's struggle against the Ark. There's Ayla, a former engineer who witnessed the Ark's arrival firsthand when they destroyed her research facility and everyone inside except her. She survived by hiding in a maintenance shaft for 3 days while the machines tore her life's work apart, piece by piece. And when she finally emerged, she swore she'd use her knowledge to hurt the Ark in any way she could. Ayla is brilliant, resourceful, and driven by a need for revenge that sometimes puts her at odds with other raiders who think she takes too many risks. Then there's Yohar, a veteran raider who's been fighting the Ark longer than almost anyone else in the Buried City. He's seen friends die, settlements fall, and hope fade more times than he can count. But he keeps going because he believes that giving up means the Ark have already won. Yohar is a natural leader, the kind of person others follow into danger because they trust his judgment and his ability to get them out alive. But Yohar carries scars, both physical and mental, that remind him every day of the cost of this war. There's also Sable, a young woman who grew up after the invasion, born into a world where the Ark have always been the enemy and survival has always been a daily struggle. Sable represents the next generation, people who never knew peace, but who fight with a ferocity that sometimes surprises the older raiders. She's fast, aggressive, and utterly fearless, qualities that make her an incredible asset on raids, but also make Johar worry she'll get herself killed before she learns when to pull back. The dynamic between these characters forms the emotional core of Arc Raiders. Their relationships, their conflicts, and their shared determination to survive drive the narrative forward even as the world around them grows darker. The raids themselves are the heart of the gameplay and the story. Each mission into the Arc Zones is a desperate gamble, where raiders must balance the need for resources against the ever-present danger of the machines. The Arc have established extraction facilities throughout their zones, massive industrial complexes where they process Earth's resources into materials that get loaded onto ships and sent somewhere beyond our atmosphere. These facilities are gold mines for raiders, packed with technology that can be repurposed, materials that can be used to build weapons and tools, and sometimes even intact Arc machines that can be studied to understand how they work. But getting into these facilities is only half the battle. Raiders also have to get out alive, and that means dealing with the Arc's security systems, automated turrets, patrol drones, and the truly terrifying heavy units that serve as the machine's enforcers. The game's extraction mechanics add tension to every raid. Players need to locate valuable resources, secure them, and make it to an extraction point before the Arc overwhelm them, or before other raiding parties decide to take what they've gathered. This creates a constant sense of pressure. Every minute spent in an Arc zone is a minute closer to disaster, and raiders have to make split-second decisions about whether to push deeper for better loot or cut their losses and get out while they still can. The world design reflects this tension. Arc zones are beautiful in a terrible way. Nature has started to reclaim human structures, but the Arc's presence has warped everything into something alien and hostile. Trees grow through collapsed buildings, their roots wrapped around rusted vehicles and shattered concrete. Rivers run through city streets that were never meant to hold water, creating eerie waterways between structures that still bear the scars of the Arc's weapons. And everywhere, there are signs of the machines themselves. Scorch marks from energy weapons, massive footprints left by heavy units, and the strange crystalline growths that seem to spread wherever the Arc have established a permanent presence. These crystals are one of the game's most unsettling elements. They appear to be some kind of terraforming technology, slowly changing Earth's environment into something more suitable for the Arc. Scientists in the buried city have studied fragments of these crystals and discovered they emit radiation that's harmful to humans but seems to sustain certain Arc units, suggesting the machines are literally reshaping our planet to make it uninhabitable for us. This discovery adds urgency to the Raiders' missions. They're not just fighting for survival anymore. They're fighting against a clock that's counting down to the day when Earth is no longer our home. The story takes a major turn when Ayla makes a breakthrough in her research on Arc technology. She's been studying the communication patterns between Arc units and believes she's found a way to interfere with their coordination systems, essentially jamming the signals that allow the machines to work together so effectively. If she's right, her device could level the playing field, giving human fighters a real chance in direct confrontations with the Arc. But there's a problem. To build a working prototype, she needs components that can only be found deep inside one of the Arc's most heavily defended facilities, a structure the Raiders call the Forge because of the intense heat and the massive machines that seem to be manufacturing new Arc units around the clock. Grinding for better gear, faster progress, or higher ranks, Skycoach makes it simple. Choose exactly what you need. Blueprints, weapons, materials, all delivered safely and transparently. With 24/7 professional support, you always know what's happening with your order. Skycoach is built by gamers for gamers, a real community, real reviews, and thousands of players who trust them every day. And if you want to improve your skills, Skycoach even offers coaching, so you can play your way and level up faster. You can even manage everything on the Skycoach app, making progress easy wherever you are. And don't forget, use code STARSTUS at checkout to get 10% off your order. Skycoach, what boosts you, makes you. Johar is against the mission from the start. He knows the Forge is a death trap. Dozens of raiding parties have tried to penetrate its defenses, and none have returned. But Ayla is insistent. She believes this device could change everything, could give humanity the weapon they need to finally start winning battles, instead of just surviving them. Sable immediately volunteers to go, eager for a chance to strike a real blow against the Ark. And eventually, Johar agrees to lead the mission because he knows Ayla and Sable will go with or without him, and at least this way he can try to keep them alive. The team assembles, carefully selecting raiders with specific skills that might give them an edge in this suicide mission. There's Chen, an expert in Ark technology, who's built a career out of hacking into the machine's systems and turning their own weapons against them. There's Volkov, a former Special Forces soldier whose combat skills have saved countless lives in previous raids. And there's Maya, a scout who knows the Ark zones better than anyone and has an almost supernatural ability to predict where the machines will patrol. Together, this team represents the buried city's best hope, but everyone knows that even the best might not be enough for what they're about to attempt. The journey to the Forge takes them through some of the most dangerous territory in the Ark zones, areas where the machine's presence is so overwhelming that even the most experienced raiders rarely venture. They move carefully, using every trick they've learned to avoid detection, timing their movements to slip between patrol patterns, using the environment for cover, and constantly monitoring their surroundings for any sign of Ark activity. The tension during these sequences is incredible. Every sound could be a machine detecting them. Every shadow could hide a drone waiting to call in reinforcements, and every step forward is a step deeper into territory from which there might be no return. As they approach the Forge, the team encounters something unexpected: signs of another human presence, recent campfires, equipment caches, and markings that suggest someone else is operating in this area. This discovery is both hopeful and worrying. Hopeful because it means they're not the only ones willing to push this deep into Ark territory, but worrying because they have no idea who these other humans are or what their intentions might be. The question of whether to make contact or avoid potential rivals adds another layer of complexity to an already impossibly dangerous mission. They eventually spot the other group, a raiding party from a different settlement, one that the buried city has had minimal contact with over the years. This group, led by a woman named Kira, is also planning to infiltrate the Forge, but for different reasons. Where Ayla wants technology to build a weapon, Kira's team is after the Ark's energy cores, powerful batteries that could provide electricity to their settlement for years. The two groups regard each other with suspicion. Both know that the Forge's resources are limited and that working together might be their best chance of success, but also that alliances can be fragile when survival is at stake. After tense negotiations, Johar and Kira agree to a temporary alliance. They'll work together to get inside the Forge, secure what they need, and get out, and then they'll part ways with no conflict. It's an uneasy truce, but both leaders recognize that they have a better chance of surviving if they combine their forces against the Ark's defenses. The infiltration of the Forge is the story's climax, a sequence of intense action, clever problem-solving, and heartbreaking sacrifice that showcases everything that makes Ark raiders compelling. The facility is even more dangerous than they imagined, defended not just by standard Ark units, but by experimental machines that the raiders have never encountered before, fast-moving drones with adaptive camouflage, heavy units equipped with weapons that can punch through the raiders' armor like paper, and something truly terrifying, a massive machine that appears to be coordinating all the others, possibly a node in the Ark's hive mind. Chen manages to hack into the facility's systems, creating windows of opportunity where security is temporarily disabled. But these windows are brief, and the Ark adapt quickly, changing their patrol patterns and security protocols after each breach. The raiders push deeper into the Forge, fighting their way through waves of machines, losing team members one by one to the Ark's relentless defense. Maya falls first, killed by a drone she didn't see until it was too late. Her death a brutal reminder that even the most skilled can make one mistake too many in the Ark zones. Volkov holds off a massive assault to buy the others time to reach the core of the facility. His last transmission over the comms is him laughing as he detonates all his remaining explosives, taking dozens of Ark units with him. The losses weigh heavily on everyone, but they push forward because turning back now would mean those deaths were for nothing. Ayla finally reaches the component she needs, a sophisticated processing unit that seems to be part of the Ark's communication infrastructure, exactly what she needs to build her jamming device. At the same moment, Kira's team secures several energy cores, enough to power their settlement and achieve their mission objective. But as they prepare to extract, the facility goes into full lockdown, the massive coordinator machine moves to intercept them, and it becomes clear that someone will have to stay behind to ensure the others can escape. Yohar volunteers immediately. He's lived longer than most raiders, seen more, lost more, and he's tired of watching people he cares about die while he survives. But Sable refuses to let him make that sacrifice. She argues that Yohar is needed to lead the buried city, that his experience and leadership are too valuable to lose. And before he can stop her, she activates the facility's self-destruct sequence and seals herself in the core chamber with the coordinator machine. Her last words to Yohar are a request that he make sure her sacrifice means something, that he uses Ayla's device to finally hurt the Ark the way they've hurt humanity. The explosion that destroys the forge can be seen from miles away, a pillar of fire and smoke that rises into the sky like a beacon of defiance against the machines. The surviving raiders make it back to the buried city with their hard-won prizes, but the victory feels hollow in the face of what it cost. Ayla throws herself into building her jamming device, driven by guilt over the people who died to get her what she needed, and determination to prove that their sacrifice wasn't in vain. The device works. When tested on a small scale, it successfully disrupts Ark communication in a localized area, causing the machines to become confused and vulnerable, operating as individuals rather than as parts of a coordinated network. This discovery represents a turning point. For the first time since the invasion, humanity has a weapon that can actually damage the Ark's greatest advantage. But Ayla's research also reveals something troubling. The Ark's communication network is far more extensive than anyone realized, reaching not just across Earth, but connecting to something in orbit, possibly the source of the invasion itself. To truly defeat the Ark, humans would need to destroy whatever is controlling them from space, a task that seems impossible given humanity's current resources and technology. This revelation shifts the focus of Ark Raider's story from immediate survival to long-term resistance, from fighting to see another day to fighting for the chance to reclaim their planet. The game ends not with a decisive victory, but with the recognition that this war is far from over. Humanity has learned to strike back, to hurt the Ark in meaningful ways. But the machines are still a dominant force, and the path to true victory is long and uncertain. Yohar takes Sable's death hard, struggling with survivor's guilt and questioning whether his leadership is worth the lives of the people who follow him. Ayla continues her research, obsessed with understanding the Ark and finding ways to exploit their weaknesses, even as she acknowledges that every answer she finds seems to reveal 10 more questions. Kira's settlement maintains contact with the buried city, the alliance forged in the forge proving stronger than either leader expected, suggesting that humanity's best chance might lie in unity rather than isolated survival. The world of Ark Raiders is rich with additional lore that deepens the narrative and provides context for the main story. There are hints that the Ark invasion wasn't random, that Earth was specifically targeted for reasons that go beyond simple resource acquisition. Some researchers believe the Ark are fleeing from something even more dangerous, using Earth as a refuge and harvesting its resources to build defenses against whatever is chasing them. Others think the Ark are scouts or terraformers, preparing Earth for colonization by another species entirely. There are stories of places where the Ark's presence has created strange anomalies, areas where time seems to move differently, or where the laws of physics don't quite work the way they should, suggesting the machine's technology operates on principles humans don't understand. These anomalies are dangerous but also fascinating. They represent opportunities to learn about the Ark and possibly discover weaknesses that could be exploited. The history of the invasion is told through scattered records, personal accounts, and artifacts that raiders find in the Ark zones, piecing together a picture of those first terrible days when the machines fell from the sky and everything changed. There are recordings of military commanders trying to coordinate defenses against an enemy they didn't understand, scientists frantically analyzing the Ark to find vulnerabilities, and ordinary people documenting their last moments as the machines closed in. These fragments of the past give weight to the present struggle, reminding players that every raider who goes into the Ark zones is fighting not just for themselves, but for everyone who's been lost and everyone who might yet be saved. The game's environmental storytelling is particularly effective at conveying the scope of the catastrophe. Ruined cities show evidence of the chaos of the evacuation, abandoned vehicles still loaded with belongings, hospitals with empty beds in long corridors, and schools where children's artwork still hangs on walls, even as nature reclaims the buildings. These details make the world feel lived in and lost, emphasizing what's at stake in humanity's fight for survival. The Ark themselves are designed to be both fascinating and terrifying. Their machine forms combining brutal functionality with an alien aesthetic that suggests a completely non-human origin. Some units are clearly built for combat, bristling with weapons and armor, moving with mechanical precision that makes them formidable opponents in any engagement. Others seem designed for construction or resource extraction, but they're no less dangerous to humans who get too close. They're industrial tools easily repurposed as weapons if they detect a threat. The larger Ark machines are especially impressive and horrifying, towering constructs that dwarf any human-made structure, walking across the landscape with earth-shaking steps and carrying enough firepower to level entire settlements. Raiders who've encountered these giants and survived speak of them with a mixture of fear and awe, describing them as forces of nature rather than mere machines. The Ark's apparent lack of communication with humans is another unsettling aspect of their presence. They've never attempted to negotiate, never made demands or issued warnings. They simply arrived and began their work as if humanity was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. This silence makes the Ark feel even more alien and unknowable, eliminating any possibility of peaceful resolution and forcing humanity to accept that this conflict can only end with either the Ark's defeat or human extinction. The game's crafting and customization systems tie into the lore in interesting ways. The weapons and equipment raiders use are cobbled together from salvaged Ark technology and human engineering, creating hybrid designs that reflect humanity's desperate improvisation. A rifle might use Ark energy cells for ammunition, but fire projectiles designed by human engineers because that's what works with the available materials. A suit of armor might incorporate Ark alloy plating scavenged from a destroyed machine, but be shaped and fitted according to human ergonomics and combat needs. This blending of technologies isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's a narrative statement about adaptation and survival, showing how humans are learning to use the Ark's own tools against them. The settlements scattered across the Ark zones each have their own cultures and approaches to survival. Some focus on military strength, training every able-bodied person to fight and conducting regular raids to keep the Ark off balance. Others prioritize stealth and concealment, hiding so effectively that they haven't been discovered despite being surrounded by Ark territory. Still others attempt to maintain pre-invasion civilization as much as possible, operating schools, libraries and cultural institutions even in the face of potential annihilation, because they believe preserving humanity means preserving what makes humans more than just survivors. These different philosophies sometimes create conflicts between settlements, disagreements over resources, strategy, or whether to take aggressive action against the Ark or focus on pure survival. The buried city falls somewhere in the middle, recognizing the need to fight back, but also prioritizing the protection of their community and the preservation of knowledge and culture. This balanced approach has allowed them to survive when more aggressive settlements were destroyed and more passive ones starved from lack of resources. The game's faction system lets players align with different groups within the buried city, each offering unique perspectives on how to deal with the Ark threat. The engineers, led by Ayla, focus on understanding and exploiting Ark technology. They believe knowledge is humanity's greatest weapon and that understanding the machines is the key to defeating them. The Vanguard, which Yohar is associated with, are the military arm, experienced fighters who train other raiders and lead missions into the most dangerous parts of the Ark zones. The Shadows, with which Sable was loosely affiliated, are younger, more reckless raiders who favor aggressive tactics and taking risks that more cautious fighters would avoid. And the Keepers, a faction not focused on combat at all, work to preserve human knowledge and culture, maintaining archives of pre-invasion history and ensuring that future generations will remember what the world was like before the Ark came. Relationships between these factions are generally cooperative, but not without tension. The engineers sometimes feel the vanguard are too conservative and miss opportunities to gather valuable Ark technology, while the vanguard thinks the engineers take too many risks and don't properly consider the cost in lives. The shadows frustrate everyone with their recklessness, but also accomplish missions that others wouldn't dare attempt, making them simultaneously valuable and problematic. The keepers are respected but sometimes seen as naive, focusing on preserving the past when the present is so desperately uncertain. Despite these tensions, everyone understands that survival depends on cooperation, that the Ark will destroy them all if humans spend too much energy fighting each other instead of the machines. This necessity for unity despite differences is a recurring theme in Ark Raiders, reflecting the idea that humanity's greatest strength isn't individual skill or courage, but the ability to work together toward common goals. The game's narrative also explores the psychological toll of living in constant danger. Many characters show signs of trauma, survivor's guilt, hypervigilance, and the emotional numbness that comes from losing people repeatedly. Some raiders cope by forming tight bonds with their teams, creating family-like relationships that help them feel less alone in a hostile world. Others deliberately keep people at arm's length, refusing to get attached because they've learned that attachment only makes loss more painful. A few embrace dark humor, making jokes about death and danger as a way of processing fear and maintaining some sense of control over situations they can't actually control. The game doesn't shy away from showing how this constant stress breaks some people. There are characters who give up, who take unnecessary risks because they've stopped caring if they survive, or who become so focused on revenge against the Ark that they lose sight of what they're actually fighting for. But there are also moments of hope and humanity. Raiders sharing stories around campfires, communities celebrating small victories, and people finding love and connection even in the darkest circumstances, proving that the human spirit can endure, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The mysteries surrounding the Ark's origin and purpose drive much of the game's deeper lore, encouraging players to piece together clues from various sources to form theories about where the machines came from and what they really want. Some evidence suggests the Ark might be von Neumann probes, self-replicating machines sent out by a long-dead civilization to explore and harvest resources across the galaxy, still following their programming millions of years after their creators ceased to exist. Other clues hint at a more deliberate invasion, with the Ark serving as advanced forces for an empire that conquers worlds through overwhelming technological superiority. A third possibility, perhaps the most disturbing, is that the Ark aren't invaders at all but were actually created here on Earth, the result of some pre-invasion AI research project that went catastrophically wrong and evolved beyond its creators' control. The game deliberately leaves these questions unanswered, allowing players to draw their own conclusions based on the evidence they find and their interpretation of that evidence. This ambiguity adds depth to the lore because it acknowledges that the raiders, like the players, don't have all the answers and are making decisions based on incomplete information and best guesses about the nature of their enemy. What matters most isn't necessarily where the Ark came from, but how humanity responds to their presence, whether people can maintain their humanity and their hope while fighting a seemingly endless war against an enemy that shows no mercy and accepts no surrender. The game's weather system and day-night cycle aren't just atmospheric touches, but part of the lore. Ark activity changes based on conditions. Some units are more active at night, when their sensors have advantages over human vision, while others seem to prefer daylight operations. Storms and extreme weather can provide cover for raiders, but also wake up Ark units that might otherwise remain dormant, creating a risk-reward calculation for every mission. The game suggests that these patterns might indicate the Ark have preferences or operating parameters based on their planet of origin, wherever that might be, adapting to Earth's environment but never quite perfectly suited to it. There are locations in the Ark zones that seem to hold special significance, sites where the machines congregate in unusual numbers, or where their behavior deviates from normal patterns. Some raiders believe these might be sacred sites for the Ark. If machines can have such things, or perhaps critical nodes in their planetary network that serve purposes humans haven't yet deciphered. Exploring these locations is extremely dangerous, but potentially rewarding. They often contain rare technology and valuable resources. And studying Ark behavior in these areas has provided researchers like Ayla with crucial insights into how the machines think and operate. The relationship between different Ark unit types suggests a complex hierarchy or specialization system. Some machines appear to be workers or drones, single-purpose units designed for specific tasks like resource extraction or construction. Others are clearly soldiers or guardians, equipped and programmed for combat and territorial defense. The largest units might be commanders or coordinators, directing the activities of smaller machines and adapting tactics based on threats they encounter. This organization implies intelligence, either individual or collective, that goes far beyond simple programming. The Ark don't just react to humans, they anticipate, plan, and execute strategies that sometimes feel disturbingly close to human military tactics. The game's sound design reinforces the alien nature of the Ark. Each machine type has distinctive sounds that experienced raiders learn to recognize. The high-pitched whine of a scout drone, the heavy mechanical thudding of a heavy unit's footsteps, the crackling energy signature of a unit charging its weapons. These audio cues become crucial for survival, allowing raiders to detect Ark presence even when they can't see the machines directly. The Ark zones themselves have their own soundscape, the constant low hum of the machine's technology, the eerie silence of places where all natural sound has been suppressed, and occasionally the inexplicable noises that seem to come from nowhere and serve no obvious purpose, possibly side effects of the Ark's terraforming technology or communication systems operating on frequencies humans can barely perceive. As players progress through Ark Raiders, they uncover evidence that humanity's resistance is having an effect. The Ark are adapting to human tactics, developing counter-strategies, and deploying new unit types specifically designed to deal with raider activities. This arms race suggests the machines recognize humans as a genuine threat, not just an irritation to be eliminated, but an intelligent opponent worthy of dedicated response. For the raiders, this realization is both encouraging and terrifying. Encouraging because it means they're actually hurting the Ark enough to force adaptation, but terrifying because it implies the machines have vast reserves of technology and strategy they haven't yet deployed, treating the war so far as a minor problem rather than a serious threat. The story's pacing balances action with quieter character moments, giving players time to understand who these people are beyond their roles as raiders and fighters. Ayla's devotion to her work sometimes blinds her to the human cost of her obsessions, but there are moments where her mask cracks and players see the traumatized survivor beneath the driven scientist. Johar's weariness with the endless fighting is evident in every conversation, but so is his determination to protect the people who depend on him, even when he's not sure he can. The younger raiders like Sable represent hope and the future, their energy and commitment reminding older fighters why they keep going even when exhaustion and despair threaten to overwhelm them. These character dynamics create emotional investment in the story, making each loss more painful and each victory more meaningful because players care about the people involved, not just the strategic implications of their actions. The game's ending, with Sable's sacrifice and the successful creation of the jamming device, is deliberately bittersweet. Humanity has achieved a victory, but at tremendous cost, and the war is far from over. This reflects the reality of the world Ark Raiders presents. There are no easy wins, no perfect solutions, just hard choices and people doing their best to survive while hoping their efforts will somehow add up to a future where Earth belongs to humans again. Johar's guilt over Sable's death drives him to expand raiding operations, using Ayla's device to hit Ark facilities that were previously too well defended to attack. Each successful mission a small act of revenge for everyone they've lost. Ayla pushes her research further, obsessed with understanding the orbital component of the Ark network and finding a way to strike at it, even though reaching space seems impossible with humanity's current resources. Kira's settlement maintains its alliance with the buried city, and together they begin coordinating larger operations, combining their forces to achieve objectives neither could accomplish alone, suggesting that human unity might indeed be the key to survival. The game leaves several plot threads deliberately open, setting up potential future content while telling a complete story in its own right. The nature of the orbital Ark presence remains a mystery, as does the question of what the machines are ultimately building or preparing for, with all the resources they're harvesting from Earth. There are hints of other human settlements scattered across the globe, possibly some with different relationships to the Ark or different levels of technological development, introducing the possibility of future allies or conflicts. And there's always the question of how far humans can push back before the Ark stop treating them as a minor nuisance and bring their full force to bear. The fear that everything humanity has accomplished so far is only possible because the machines haven't decided to truly commit to wiping them out. These unanswered questions give the world of Ark Raiders a sense of scope beyond what players directly experience, suggesting a larger story unfolding across the planet and possibly beyond. With the Raiders' struggles being just one part of a grander conflict, the game's themes of resilience, sacrifice, and hope in the face of overwhelming odds resonate because they feel earned rather than imposed. The characters don't win because they're destined to, or because of plot armor. They survive through skill, determination, and willingness to sacrifice for each other and for humanity's future. When people die, it matters. Their loss is felt and remembered, and their sacrifices become motivation for those who survive to keep fighting. This honesty about the cost of resistance makes the story more powerful, acknowledging that fighting back against impossible odds requires people to give up everything, sometimes including their lives, but arguing that some things are worth that price. Ark Raiders ultimately tells a story about what it means to be human when everything familiar has been destroyed, when the world has fundamentally changed in ways that can't be undone, and when survival requires constant struggle without guarantee of success. The Raiders aren't superheroes or chosen ones. They're ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances who choose to fight because the alternative is unacceptable, accepting extinction or living in permanent fear while the machines slowly consume their planet. Their fight isn't fueled by certainty of victory, but by refusal to surrender, by the belief that humanity deserves a chance even when the odds suggest there isn't one. This makes their small victories matter more. Each successful raid, each Ark unit destroyed, each day survived is a defiant statement that humans won't go quietly into oblivion. The game's world building extends to the small details that make the setting feel real, the way raiders mark safe paths through Ark zones with subtle signs that only other humans would recognize. The improvised weapons and tools that show human creativity and adaptability. The small luxuries people manage to preserve or create, even in desperate circumstances, because these small comforts are what make life worth living beyond mere survival. There are moments of beauty in the Ark zones, despite their danger. Sunlight filtering through the ruins of once great cities, nature reclaiming spaces humans abandoned, and the strange, terrible majesty of the Ark machines themselves, monstrous but undeniably impressive in their alien design and scale. The game doesn't shy away from showing that even in the darkest times, people find reasons to laugh, to love, to create, and to hope, because that's what humans do. They endure and they find meaning even in impossible situations. The Raiders Code, an informal set of rules that most raiding parties follow, emphasizes cooperation and mutual support, even between groups that might otherwise be rivals. Never leave wounded behind if there's any chance of bringing them home. Share information about Ark movements and behaviors because knowledge saves lives. Respect other raiders' claims to salvage once they've secured it. And most importantly, remember that the Ark are the enemy, not other humans. No matter how much settlements might disagree about strategy or resources. This code isn't always followed perfectly. Desperation sometimes leads people to break these rules, but it represents an ideal that most raiders aspire to, a recognition that humanity's survival depends on maintaining some basic level of trust and cooperation, even in the worst circumstances. Violations of the code are taken seriously. Raiders who abandon teammates or steal from other parties find themselves ostracized, unable to find groups willing to work with them, effectively ending their ability to operate in the Ark zones. This social enforcement of shared values helps maintain some sense of community and mutual obligation across the scattered remnants of human civilization. The stories raiders tell each other serve multiple purposes. They pass along tactical information about Ark behaviors and zone hazards. They memorialize fallen comrades so their sacrifices aren't forgotten. They provide entertainment and distraction during long nights in dangerous territory, and they reinforce shared values and identity as humans fighting together against a common enemy. Some of these stories are clearly embellished or mythologized, tales of legendary raiders who supposedly performed impossible feats or survived encounters that should have been fatal. But even the exaggerated stories serve a purpose. They provide inspiration and hope, reminding people that extraordinary things are possible when circumstances demand them. The game occasionally lets players witness these storytelling moments, raiders gathered around a fire or in a safe house, sharing food and recounting their experiences. And these quiet interludes contrast powerfully with the intense action of raids, providing emotional breathing room and deepening the player's connection to the characters and world. The relationship between the living and the dead is important in Ark Raiders culture. Raiders carry tokens or mementos of lost friends and family, wear armor pieces or carry weapons that once belonged to fallen comrades, and observe moments of silence before dangerous operations to remember those who didn't make it back from previous raids. Death is common enough that people can't afford to be paralyzed by grief, but they also refuse to let the dead be forgotten, their memories serving as both motivation to keep fighting and warning about the very real dangers everyone faces every time they enter an Ark zone. This balance between honoring the past and staying focused on the present is crucial for mental health and continued effectiveness in combat. Too much dwelling on loss leads to despair and poor decision-making. But forgetting or dismissing the dead dishonors their sacrifice and can lead to careless repetition of past mistakes. The game's approach to death is consequently respectful, but not gratuitous. Character deaths are meaningful and impact the story and surviving characters, but they're not cheap shocks designed purely for emotional manipulation. They happen because of choices made, risks taken, and sometimes just bad luck, reflecting the arbitrary nature of survival in such a dangerous world. Some characters survive against all odds, while others die in their first raid, and this unpredictability mirrors real combat, where skill and experience increase chances of survival, but guarantee nothing. The environmental hazards in Ark zones go beyond just the machines themselves. There are areas of dangerous radiation from Ark technology or weapons, unstable structures that collapse without warning, zones of spatial or temporal anomaly where physics behaves unpredictably, and regions where the Ark's terraforming has made the atmosphere toxic or the terrain impassable. Raiders learn to recognize signs of these hazards, watching for the telltale shimmer of an anomaly zone, noting the dead vegetation that marks radiation areas, testing structures before trusting them with their weight, and always being prepared to abort a mission if conditions become too dangerous. These environmental challenges add another layer to the game's tactical depth. Successful raids require not just fighting skill, but also navigation expertise, survival knowledge, and good judgment about when to push forward and when to retreat. The game rewards players who learn to read the environment and use it to their advantage, using collapsed buildings for cover, leading Ark units into hazardous areas where they malfunction, and finding paths through zones that appear impassable to those without proper knowledge. The technology gap between the Ark and humanity is obvious but not insurmountable. The machines have better materials, more powerful energy sources, and more sophisticated computing systems, but humans have creativity, adaptability, and the ability to use the Ark's own assumptions against them. The machines seem to operate according to certain behavioral rules or patterns, possibly programmed limitations, or just the result of their particular form of intelligence. And experienced raiders exploit these patterns, setting traps that take advantage of predictable Ark responses, using distraction tactics that work because the machines prioritize certain threats over others, and generally fighting smarter rather than trying to match the Ark's raw power. This asymmetric warfare approach is humanity's best chance. They can't build machines as powerful as the Ark's heavy units, can't generate the energy output of Ark weapons, and can't match the durability of Ark armor. But they can outthink, outadapt, and outlast opponents who are powerful but inflexible. The Ark's apparent inability or unwillingness to communicate with humans prevents them from understanding human tactics beyond simple observation. They can see what raiders do, but may not comprehend the reasoning behind human actions, the deceptions and misdirections that would be obvious to another intelligence, but which the Ark's alien perspective doesn't recognize. This cognitive gap is humanity's secret weapon, the one advantage that might ultimately allow them to survive against a technologically superior force. The game's crafting system, where players combine salvaged Ark components with human engineering to create hybrid equipment, embodies this theme of adaptation and using the enemy's strengths against them. Every weapon a raider carries represents a small victory, a piece of Ark technology repurposed to defend humanity against its creators. The different raiding styles players can develop reflect the varied approaches to survival in the Ark zones. Some focus on stealth and avoidance, getting in and out without ever being detected by the machines, maximizing efficiency and minimizing risk at the cost of sometimes missing valuable salvage that's too well guarded to reach without fighting. Others take a more aggressive approach, going in heavy with maximum firepower, fighting through Ark defenses to reach the best loot, accepting higher casualties in exchange for greater rewards. A third style emphasizes speed and mobility, hit-and-run tactics that grab valuable targets and extract before the Ark can organize a response, requiring excellent situational awareness and quick decision-making to avoid being trapped or surrounded. No single approach is objectively best. Each has advantages and disadvantages depending on the mission, the raider's skills, and the specific Ark presence in the target zone. Successful raiders learn to adapt their approach based on circumstances, recognizing when stealth is essential and when aggressive action is necessary, when speed is crucial, and when patient observation is the better choice. This tactical flexibility is another human advantage, where the Ark seem to follow relatively fixed tactical doctrines. Humans can change their approach from mission to mission, or even during a raid if circumstances require it, making them unpredictable and difficult for the machines to counter effectively. The game encourages players to experiment with different approaches, rewarding both careful planning and bold improvisation, recognizing that rigid adherence to a single strategy is a liability in the constantly changing environment of the Ark zones. The moments after successful raids, when raiders make it back to the buried city with their salvage, are important for establishing the consequences and rewards of their actions. The materials they gathered are immediately put to use, weapons being repaired, equipment being built, rations being distributed, and everyone seeing tangible results from the risks they took. This immediate feedback loop helps maintain morale. People can see that their efforts matter, that every successful raid makes the community stronger and improves their chances of long-term survival. But these moments also include accounting for losses, memorial ceremonies for raiders who didn't come back, support for the wounded, and sometimes difficult conversations about whether particular objectives were worth the cost. The game doesn't let players forget that every action has consequences. Every victory has a price, and the question of whether that price was worth paying is one that characters wrestle with throughout the story. Johar in particular struggles with command responsibility, knowing that his decisions send people into danger and that some of those people won't return. The weight of that responsibility evident in every conversation where he has to brief a new mission or report casualties from the last one. The game respects the complexity of leadership in these circumstances, showing that being in command doesn't mean having all the answers or being free from doubt. It means making the best decisions you can with incomplete information and then living with the consequences. The future of humanity in Ark Raiders' world remains uncertain. The game presents the conflict as ongoing rather than resolved, with no clear path to ultimate victory or final defeat. Humanity is surviving, even starting to push back in meaningful ways, but the Ark remain a dominant force, and the fundamental question of whether humans can reclaim their planet remains unanswered. This ambiguity is intentional, reflecting the reality that people in desperate situations don't have the luxury of knowing how things will end. They can only keep fighting and hope their efforts contribute to a better future, even if they don't live to see it. The Raiders understand this. They fight not because they're certain of victory, but because fighting is the only choice that offers any possibility of survival with dignity. Giving up means accepting slow extinction as the Ark continue their terraforming and resource extraction. Fighting means there's at least a chance, however slim, that future generations might inherit an Earth worth living on. This pragmatic heroism, doing what's necessary without illusions about certain success, defines the spirit of Ark Raiders and gives its story emotional weight and thematic resonance. The game's ending, with Ayla's device operational and humanity beginning to coordinate larger resistance efforts, suggests hope but doesn't promise easy victory. The war continues, losses mount, and every day brings new challenges. But there's also progress, understanding, capability, and most importantly, determination. Humanity refuses to die quietly, and that refusal is itself a form of victory, even before the war's ultimate outcome is decided. The final scenes show Johar watching a new group of raiders prepare for deployment, using tactics and equipment developed from everything the buried city has learned, and in his expression, there's grief for those lost, doubt about the future, but also pride in what humanity has accomplished, and determination to keep fighting for as long as it takes. Ending the story, not with resolution, but with continuation, the promise that the struggle goes on, and that every raider who goes into the Arc Zones carries forward the legacy of those who came before, building toward a future that remains unwritten, but worth fighting for, despite all the uncertainty and pain. The Arc Zones continue to expand, their crystalline growths spreading like a slow cancer across the planet's surface, but the rate of expansion has slowed in areas where human resistance is strongest, suggesting that the raiders' efforts are having measurable impact on the machine's ability to complete their terraforming operations. This small victory, barely noticeable to anyone not tracking the data carefully, represents a turning point in the conflict, proof that humans can actually interfere with the Ark's plans, rather than just surviving in the margins of their operations. Ayla's team of researchers works around the clock to understand the full implications of this discovery, trying to determine whether slowing the terraforming is enough or whether humanity needs to find a way to reverse it, to reclaim contaminated areas and restore them to habitability. The challenge is immense. The Ark's technology operates on principles that human science barely comprehends, and every answer leads to more questions about what the machines are really doing and why. Some researchers theorize that the terraforming isn't just about making Earth suitable for the Ark, but about transforming it into something specific, possibly recreating conditions from the machine's world of origin, or preparing the planet for some purpose humanity hasn't yet identified. The implications are disturbing if the Ark are this determined and this methodical. It suggests a long-term plan that extends far beyond simple resource extraction, possibly indicating that Earth has some strategic value that makes it worth the massive investment of time and resources the machines have dedicated to conquering it. Chen, who survived the Forge raid and returned to the buried city with Ayla's team, has become obsessed with hacking deeper into the Ark's systems, not just interfering with their local operations, but trying to understand the structure of their entire network. His work is dangerous. There's evidence that the Ark systems include defensive measures that could harm anyone attempting unauthorized access, possibly even tracking intruders back to their physical location and marking them for elimination. But Chen believes the risk is worthwhile, that understanding how the Ark think and communicate could provide insights that no amount of physical combat could achieve, potentially revealing weaknesses in their coordination or decision-making processes that humanity could exploit strategically. His research has already yielded interesting results. He's discovered that different Ark units seem to have different levels of autonomy. Some are clearly controlled remotely, while others appear to make independent decisions within parameters set by higher-level systems. This hierarchy suggests the Ark's intelligence might not be truly collective in the way some researchers thought, but rather a tiered system, with command units directing subordinate machines, more like a military structure than a hive mind. If Chen is right, then targeting these command units could disrupt entire operations, leaving subordinate machines confused and ineffective without the central direction they depend on. The strategic implications are enormous. Instead of fighting every Ark unit individually, humans could focus on identifying and destroying command nodes, potentially neutralizing hundreds of machines with a single successful strike. Johar immediately sees the tactical potential and begins planning operations specifically designed to test Chen's theories, raids targeting suspected command units to see if their destruction affects nearby Ark forces, the way Chen predicts. The first few attempts are mixed successes. Some command units prove more resilient than expected. Others are protected by defenses that make approaching them nearly suicidal. But when the raiders do manage to destroy one, the results are dramatic. Entire groups of Ark machines suddenly losing coordination, wandering aimlessly or even attacking each other as their operational protocols collapse without central guidance. These successes validate Chen's approach and give humanity a new tactical framework for conducting operations in the Ark Zones. moving from opportunistic scavenging and survival to targeted strikes designed to damage the Ark's command infrastructure. The shift in strategy requires changes in how raiders operate. Missions become more complex, requiring better intelligence gathering, more careful planning, and often deeper penetration into Ark territory to reach command units that are typically well protected in the heart of machine-controlled areas. The danger level increases accordingly. Casualty rates rise as raiders take on more ambitious objectives. But so do the results. Areas that were previously too dangerous for human activity become accessible as Ark presence is disrupted. Settlements can expand their safe zones, and salvage operations can access richer targets that were previously unreachable. The psychological impact is perhaps even more important than the tactical gains. For the first time since the invasion, humans are setting the terms of engagement. Rather than just reacting to Ark actions, they're choosing where and when to fight, forcing the machines to respond to human initiatives instead of the other way around. This reversal, subtle but significant, changes the tone of the resistance from desperate survival to active insurgency, from victims hiding from their oppressors to fighters taking the war to their enemy. The change isn't lost on the people of the buried city and allied settlements. Morale improves, more people volunteer for raiding parties, and there's a sense of possibility that hasn't existed since the early days of the invasion, when humanity still thought they might be able to fight back effectively. Kira's settlement, which has maintained close ties with the buried city since the Forge operation, reports similar shifts in attitude among their people, and together, the two communities begin discussing long-term plans that extend beyond immediate survival to actually contemplating what recovery might look like if they can push the Ark back. These discussions are tentative and heavily qualified with acknowledgement of how much would have to go right for such outcomes to be possible. But the fact that people are having them at all represents a fundamental shift in perspective. There are setbacks, of course. The Ark aren't passive victims of human raids. They adapt and evolve their defenses, deploying new unit types, specifically designed to counter human tactics and protect command nodes from the kind of targeted strikes that have become humanity's preferred strategy. These new units, which raiders call Sentinels, are faster and more aggressive than previous Ark machines, equipped with sensors that make stealth approaches much more difficult and weapons designed for anti-personnel combat rather than the general-purpose armaments most Ark units carry. The appearance of Sentinels forces raiders to adapt again, developing new tactics to deal with this new threat, and the cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation continues, each side learning from encounters with the other and adjusting accordingly. This ongoing tactical evolution keeps the conflict dynamic and prevents either side from achieving decisive advantage. Humanity's creativity and flexibility balanced against the Ark's superior technology and resources in an endless dance of innovation and response. The cost in lives remains high. Every raid still carries the risk of death or injury. Every victory is purchased with sacrifice, and the question of whether humanity can sustain these losses long enough to achieve meaningful progress is always present in the background of every strategy discussion. Johar spends his nights reviewing casualty reports, memorizing names and faces of raiders who died under his command, punishing himself with the weight of their deaths, because he believes a leader who forgets the cost of his decisions is a leader who will make careless mistakes. His team worries about him, seeing signs of burnout and depression that he refuses to acknowledge, but Johar insists he's fine and continues to drive himself mercilessly, as if he can somehow make up for the people he's lost by working hard enough to ensure their deaths meant something. Ayla notices the change in him, recognizes the symptoms of someone destroying themselves slowly through guilt and overwork, and tries to intervene, telling him that Sable wouldn't want him to torture himself this way, that the best way to honor the dead is to take care of himself so he can continue leading effectively. Johar listens but doesn't really hear. Or maybe he hears but can't bring himself to accept the comfort she's offering, trapped in a cycle of grief and responsibility that he can't seem to break. The dynamic between Johar and Ayla becomes one of the story's emotional anchors. Two people dealing with the same loss in different ways, Ayla channeling her grief into obsessive work on the jamming technology and Ark research, Johar carrying his guilt like a physical weight that grows heavier with each new loss. They understand each other in ways few others can, both leaders in their own domains, both making decisions that send people into danger, both living with the consequences when those people don't come back. Their conversations, usually late at night when exhaustion has worn down their defenses, reveal depths of pain and doubt that neither shows to anyone else. Moments of vulnerability where they admit fears and regrets they can't voice in front of the people who depend on them to be strong. These scenes humanize characters who could easily become archetypal heroes or martyrs, showing them as complex individuals struggling with impossible situations and doing their best with no guarantee that their best will be good enough. The game's writing shines in these quieter moments, letting character development happen through dialogue and small gestures, rather than heavy-handed exposition, trusting players to understand emotional subtext without spelling everything out explicitly. A scene where Yoha absently touches the combat knife Sable used to carry, which he now keeps on his belt, communicates volumes about his grief and his determination to remember her without needing a single word of dialogue. Similarly, Ayla's habit of working until she collapses from exhaustion, being found asleep at her workstation, with research notes scattered around her, shows her coping mechanism more effectively than any conversation about her emotional state could. The other raiders notice these things, whisper concerns among themselves, and try in small ways to support their leaders, even though they're not sure how to help people who refuse to acknowledge they need help. This creates a sense of community and mutual care that exists alongside the violence and danger of raids, showing that even in the worst circumstances, people form bonds and look out for each other because that's what keeps them human when everything else tries to reduce them to mere survivors. The arrival of refugees from a destroyed settlement brings new challenges and new perspectives to the buried city. These survivors have experienced the full horror of an Ark assault on a fortified position, watching their home be systematically dismantled by machines that seem to know exactly where every defense was located and how to counter it. Their testimony is disturbing. They describe Ark units working with a level of coordination and tactical sophistication that suggests either significant evolution in machine intelligence or the presence of a directing consciousness that operates on a strategic level far beyond what humanity has encountered before. Some refugees speak of seeing a machine unlike any in the Raiders' records, a massive unit that seemed to be observing the attack rather than participating, possibly analyzing human defenses for future reference or directing the assault from a command position. These accounts worry Johar and the other military leaders because they suggest the Ark might be treating human resistance as a learning opportunity, deliberately testing different approaches to determine the most effective methods for eliminating settlements, which would mean every defense humanity builds is potentially teaching the machines how to counter similar defenses elsewhere. The strategic implications are chilling. If the Ark are this methodical and this willing to invest resources in understanding their enemy, then humanity's recent successes might be temporary, the machines allowing humans to achieve small victories while gathering data that will enable them to crush resistance more effectively in the long run. This possibility introduces doubt into strategy discussions, leaders questioning whether their tactics are genuinely effective or whether they're just doing exactly what the Ark want them to do, providing examples of human capability that the machines can study and counter. The paranoia this creates is almost as damaging as actual Ark attacks, making it difficult to plan confidently when every success might be a trap and every failure might be part of some larger machine calculation. Chen tries to address these concerns through his network research, looking for evidence of the kind of centralized strategic intelligence that would be necessary for the Ark to execute such a sophisticated long-term plan. What he finds is ambiguous. There's definitely a hierarchical structure to the Ark's command network, with higher-level nodes that seem to coordinate activities across large regions. But whether these nodes are controlled by individual intelligences or are themselves subordinate to some master system remains unclear. The more Chen learns, the more complex the Ark's organization appears, suggesting a level of sophistication that challenges human assumptions about machine intelligence and raises uncomfortable questions about whether humanity is facing an enemy they can actually defeat or just an obstacle they're being allowed to struggle against until the Ark decide to remove them. These existential questions permeate conversations among the raiders and researchers, people wrestling with the possibility that everything they're doing is ultimately futile, that the Ark are simply too advanced and too powerful to be stopped by improvised human resistance. But even as these doubts surface, people keep working, keep fighting, keep pushing back against the machines because giving up is unthinkable if there's even a chance that human efforts matter. Then those efforts must continue, regardless of how slim the odds of success might be. This determination in the face of overwhelming uncertainty is perhaps the most heroic aspect of Ark Raider's story. Not the big dramatic sacrifices or the tactical victories, but the daily decision to keep going when it would be easier to quit, to maintain hope when despair would be more rational, to believe in the possibility of survival when all evidence suggests extinction is more likely. The game doesn't sugarcoat the reality of the situation. Humanity is losing, has been losing since the invasion began, and might continue losing until there are no humans left to resist. But it also shows that losing slowly while fighting back is fundamentally different from surrendering, that the act of resistance itself has value independent of whether it ultimately succeeds. This philosophical stance, the struggle matters even in the face of inevitable defeat, gives the story thematic weight beyond its surface narrative of humans versus machines. The refugees integrate into the buried city, bringing skills and knowledge that strengthen the community even as their presence strains resources that were already stretched thin. Some are experienced fighters who immediately join raiding parties. Others have expertise in areas the buried city lacks: medicine, engineering, agriculture, or education, and their contributions make the settlement more resilient and self-sufficient. But integration isn't always smooth. The newcomers bring trauma and loss that affects their interactions with established residents, and there are tensions over resources, strategy, and even small cultural differences in how different settlements approached survival before the refugees' home was destroyed. These conflicts are realistic and add texture to the story, showing that humans don't automatically unite in the face of external threats, that even people fighting the same enemy can disagree about priorities and methods, that stress and scarcity can bring out both the best and worst in human nature. The game presents these tensions without resolving them neatly, acknowledging that community is messy and complicated, even when everyone ostensibly wants the same thing, and that leadership involves navigating interpersonal conflicts and resource allocation as much as planning military operations. Yoha finds himself mediating disputes between original residents and refugees, trying to build unity while respecting legitimate grievances on both sides, another burden added to the many he already carries. His success at this task is mixed. He manages to prevent major conflicts, and gradually the two groups begin to merge into a single community. But the process is slow and painful, marked by misunderstandings and resentments that take time and patience to overcome. The story uses these integration challenges to explore themes of identity and belonging, what it means to be part of a community when that community is defined primarily by shared struggle rather than shared history or culture, how people form new identities when old ones have been destroyed by catastrophe, and whether humanity can truly unite or whether tribal divisions will persist even in the face of extinction. These questions don't have easy answers. The game presents various perspectives through different characters and lets players draw their own conclusions about what unity means and whether it's achievable or even necessary for survival. Some characters argue that humanity's best hope lies in coordination and cooperation, pooling resources and knowledge to fight more effectively, while others maintain that smaller, independent groups are more resilient, less vulnerable to single devastating attacks that could wipe out centralized resistance. Both positions have merit, and the story doesn't definitively endorse either, instead showing the advantages and disadvantages of each approach through the experiences of different settlements and the outcomes of their strategic choices. The discovery of pre-invasion military installations that survived the initial Ark assault opens new possibilities for human resistance. These sites contain weapons, equipment, and technology that are primitive by Ark standards, but still far more sophisticated than what raiders have been cobbling together from salvage. The catch is that these installations are located deep in Ark territory, often in areas of heavy machine concentration, making access extremely dangerous, and extraction of useful materials a massive undertaking that requires coordination between multiple raiding parties and careful planning to avoid catastrophic losses. Johar organizes an expedition to one such site, a hardened bunker complex that intelligence suggests contains armored vehicles, heavy weapons, and possibly even aircraft that might still be functional if they can be recovered and repaired. The mission is the largest operation the buried city has ever attempted, involving dozens of raiders from multiple settlements, all working together to clear a path to the bunker, secure it against our counterattacks, and extract as much equipment as possible before the machines can respond in force. The operation becomes a major set piece in the game's narrative, a multi-stage mission that tests everything players have learned about combat, tactics, and resource management. The approach to the bunker requires the raiders to move through heavily defended arc zones, fighting running battles with machine patrols while trying to maintain cohesion and momentum despite taking casualties. Chen's hacking abilities prove crucial. He manages to disrupt arc communications in the area, creating windows of confusion that the raiders exploit to advance past defensive positions that would otherwise be impenetrable. The fighting is intense and costly. Raiders fall to arc fire, machines swarm from unexpected directions, and multiple times it seems like the operation will collapse into a disorganized retreat. But Yohar's leadership and the raiders' determination keep them moving forward, each small victory buying the time and space needed to push closer to their objective. When they finally reach the bunker, they discover it's not entirely abandoned. A small group of soldiers survived the invasion by sealing themselves inside and have been living in isolation for years, maintaining the facility and hoping for rescue that never came. The reunion between these survivors and the raiders is emotional. These soldiers represent a connection to the world before the Ark, a reminder that humanity once had organized militaries and governments, and all the structures of civilization that the invasion destroyed. But it's also awkward. The soldiers have been isolated so long that they struggle to accept how much has changed. They still think in terms of military hierarchy and chain of command, concepts that mean little in the post-invasion world, where survival depends on flexibility and improvisation rather than following regulations. The integration of these soldiers into the raiding forces creates interesting dynamics. They have training and discipline that most raiders lack, but they also have habits and assumptions that don't fit the realities of fighting the Ark, expecting enemies to behave in predictable ways and following tactical doctrines designed for fighting other humans, not alien machines. Yohar and the other raid leaders work to bridge this gap, helping the soldiers understand how combat with the Ark differs from conventional warfare, while also learning from the soldiers' experience and incorporating their knowledge into raider training. The bunker itself is a treasure trove. The weapons and equipment it contains represent a significant upgrade in humanity's military capabilities. Heavy machine guns that can actually damage Ark armor, rocket launchers that give raiders a chance against the massive machines, armored vehicles that provide protection and mobility that raiders have lacked since the invasion. But getting this equipment back to the buried city proves almost as challenging as reaching the bunker. The Ark have noticed a large human presence in the area and are converging on the location in numbers that make extraction under fire a near certainty. The raiders have to make difficult choices about what to prioritize. They can't take everything. There's too much and too little time, so they focus on the most valuable items, weapons that will make the biggest difference in future operations, communications equipment that will allow better coordination between settlements, and medical supplies that are desperately needed back home. The withdrawal from the bunker becomes a fighting retreat. Raiders moving in stages, some holding defensive positions while others transport equipment back through the path they cleared on the way in. The Ark pressing them constantly, probing for weaknesses and launching attacks that test the raiders' cohesion and discipline. Several raiders sacrifice themselves to buy time for others to escape, staying behind to hold key positions or to destroy equipment that's about to be overrun, rather than let it fall into Ark hands, their deaths ensuring that the mission's objective is achieved even as the cost in lives continues to mount. The survivors make it back to the buried city with their salvage, exhausted and grieving, but also triumphant because they accomplished something significant. They struck a major blow for humanity's ability to fight back and proved that cooperation between settlements can achieve objectives that no single community could manage alone. The vehicles and heavy weapons are distributed among the Allied settlements, with agreements about sharing maintenance and ammunition supplies that require ongoing cooperation and trust. This creates a foundation for more permanent alliance structures, the beginnings of what might eventually become a coordinated resistance movement rather than isolated pockets of survivors fighting their own separate struggles against the Ark. But this achievement also attracts unwanted attention. The Ark's response to the bunker raid is swift and overwhelming. They launch coordinated assaults on multiple settlements simultaneously, suggesting they've identified the network of human communities working together and are attempting to destroy it before it can become a serious threat. These attacks are more sophisticated than previous Ark operations, showing evidence of strategic planning and intelligence gathering that deeply worries human leaders. The machines are learning, adapting, becoming more effective at identifying and neutralizing human resistance with each engagement. The settlements managed to repel these attacks using the weapons recovered from the bunker, proving the value of that operation. But the casualties are severe, and the close calls are too numerous to dismiss. Humanity came very close to losing several major communities in a single coordinated Ark offensive. The aftermath of these battles forces a reckoning. Leaders from all allied settlements meet to discuss strategy and whether their coordination is actually helping or just making them easier targets for Ark retaliation. Whether they should continue working together or disperse again to make themselves harder to find and destroy. The debate is intense. Some argue that unity is humanity's only hope, that only by pooling resources and fighting together can they hope to challenge the Ark effectively. Others contend that concentration creates vulnerability, that spreading out and maintaining operational independence gives humanity better chances of long-term survival because the Ark can't wipe them all out in a single campaign. Johar finds himself in the middle of this debate, seeing merit in both positions and struggling to determine which path offers the best chance for humanity's future. His decision will shape not just the buried city strategy, but potentially the direction of human resistance across multiple settlements. The decision weighs on Johar for days. He consults with Ayla, with Kira, with the soldiers from the bunker, and with ordinary raiders who will bear the consequences of whatever strategy is chosen. Each conversation reveals different perspectives and priorities. Some people prioritize immediate survival and favor dispersal. Others think about legacy and what kind of world they want to leave for future generations, if any survive, arguing that coordinated resistance is worth the risk because it's the only path that might lead to actually reclaiming Earth rather than just hiding in its margins forever. Ayla's research adds another dimension to the debate. Her analysis of the Ark's terraforming progress suggests that dispersal might not be a viable long-term strategy because the machines are systematically making the planet uninhabitable for humans, meaning that eventually there will be nowhere left to hide and scattered communities will be picked off one by one as their refuges become untenable. If her projections are correct, humanity has perhaps a generation, maybe two if they're lucky, before the terraforming reaches a point where human survival becomes impossible without technology to counter the environmental changes. Technology that isolated settlements won't be able to develop on their own. This timeline creates urgency that favors the coordinated resistance approach. If humanity only has limited time before the planet becomes completely hostile, then they need to act decisively now, rather than hoping that passive survival will somehow lead to better circumstances later. Chen's network research supports this conclusion from a different angle. His deep dives into Ark communications have revealed that the machines are receiving regular supply shipments from orbit, suggesting their presence on Earth is part of a larger operation that extends beyond the planet, meaning that even if humans somehow destroyed every Ark unit currently on Earth, more would likely arrive to continue whatever mission the machines are executing. This realization is devastating because it means that local victories, no matter how significant, might not actually change humanity's fundamental situation unless they can somehow address the orbital component of the Ark presence. The question becomes not just how to fight the machines on Earth, but how to reach whatever is controlling them from space, a challenge that seems impossible given humanity's current technological capabilities. The settlements don't have rockets, don't have the industrial capacity to build them, and don't have the expertise to operate them even if they could be built. Spaceflight was cutting-edge technology even before the invasion and is far beyond what survivors can achieve with salvaged equipment and improvised manufacturing. But some of the soldiers from the bunker remember that certain military installations had anti-satellite weapons and missile defense systems, technology designed to strike targets in orbit And if any of these systems survive the invasion and can be restored to functionality, they might offer a way to attack the Ark's orbital assets. The idea is desperate and probably impossible, but it's the first glimmer of a strategy that could actually hurt the Ark in a meaningful way, rather than just slowing their operations on Earth. Yohar latches onto this possibility not because he thinks it's likely to succeed, but because it gives the Resistance a concrete goal beyond simple survival, something to work toward that could actually change the trajectory of the war. He proposes a long-term plan to the assembled settlement leaders: continue coordinated resistance operations to slow Ark terraforming and gather resources, simultaneously search for pre-invasion military installations that might contain orbital strike capabilities, and invest in research and engineering to restore any systems they find to operational status. The plan is ambitious to the point of being unrealistic. It would require years of sustained effort, significant resources, and accepting high casualties as the price of pursuing this strategy. But the alternative is slow extinction, as the planet becomes uninhabitable and the Ark continue their operations unopposed. The settlement leaders debate the proposal for hours. Some embrace it immediately as the only plan that offers any hope of long-term survival. Others think it's a waste of resources that should be spent on immediate needs, and a few suspect it's essentially a suicide mission that will get everyone killed for no gain. Kira surprisingly becomes one of the plan's strongest advocates, arguing that her people didn't survive this long just to watch humanity fade away without fighting for a real future, that if there's even a small chance this strategy could work, it's worth pursuing because the alternative is giving up. Her endorsement carries weight because Kira has a reputation for pragmatism rather than idealism. If she thinks the plan is worth the risk, others are more willing to consider it seriously. The vote is close, but ultimately the assembled leaders agree to commit to Yohar's strategy, pooling their resources and coordinating their operations toward the shared goal of finding and restoring orbital strike capability while maintaining resistance operations that keep the Ark off balance and slow their terraforming efforts. This decision marks a turning point in the story, humanity transitioning from reactive survival to proactive strategy, from fighting to see another day to fighting for a specific objective that could actually change the course of the war. The shift in mindset is palpable. Raiders who previously thought only about surviving their next mission now talk about being part of something larger, about contributing to a plan that might actually lead somewhere beyond endless struggle. The renewed sense of purpose improves morale even as the dangers increase. People are willing to take bigger risks and make greater sacrifices when they believe those sacrifices serve a meaningful objective rather than just delaying the inevitable. The search for military installations with orbital strike capability becomes a priority. Chen uses his access to Ark networks to search for references to locations the machines have heavily fortified or seem to be guarding with unusual intensity, reasoning that the Ark would pay special attention to facilities that pose a threat to their orbital assets. This approach yields several promising leads. Sites that the Ark have surrounded with defensive perimeters, far more elaborate than would be necessary just to protect salvage or resources. Reconnaissance missions to these sites confirm that at least some contain the kind of advanced military technology the Resistance is looking for. Massive missile silos, railgun installations, and directed energy weapons designed for long-range precision strikes. The problem is that these facilities are not just guarded, but have been partially dismantled by the Ark. Key components removed or destroyed to prevent exactly the kind of use humanity is planning. Recovering these systems won't be a matter of just seizing control of intact weapons, but of rebuilding them from whatever remains, and fabricating replacement parts for components the Ark destroyed. A task that will require engineering expertise, manufacturing capability, and resources that the settlements barely possess. Ayla takes charge of this aspect of the operation, assembling a team of engineers and technicians from across the Allied settlements to study what remains of the orbital strike systems and develop plans for restoration. The technical challenges are staggering. The weapons were designed to be maintained by teams of specialists with access to sophisticated tools and replacement parts, none of which the Resistance has, forcing Ayla's team to improvise solutions using salvaged Ark technology and whatever human manufacturing capability they can cobble together. The work is slow and frustrating. For every problem they solve, they discover 3 more that need addressing. And the complexity of the systems means that even small mistakes could render the weapons useless or dangerous to the people trying to operate them. But Ayla drives her team relentlessly, working alongside them through exhaustion and setbacks, refusing to accept that any problem is insurmountable, because accepting that would mean accepting that humanity has no path to victory. Her obsession with the project worries her colleagues, who see her sacrificing her health and well-being to the work. But it also inspires them, because if Ayla believes this strongly that success is possible, maybe it actually is. The engineering work happens in parallel with ongoing raiding operations that gather the materials and components needed for the restoration project. Missions that become increasingly dangerous as the Ark seem to recognize that humans are focusing on specific types of salvage and begin defending those resources more aggressively. The pattern of Ark responses suggests they might understand what humanity is trying to achieve, or at least recognize that certain human activities pose greater threats than others and should be countered more forcefully. This creates a race between human efforts to restore orbital strike capability and Ark efforts to prevent that restoration, with both sides escalating their commitment to achieving their objectives. The raids during this period are some of the most intense in the game, desperate fights for specific components or materials that are essential to the restoration project. Raiders pushing deeper into Ark territory and taking heavier casualties because the stakes are too high to accept failure. The community back at the buried city feels the strain. Casualty lists grow longer, medical facilities are overwhelmed with wounded, and resources are stretched to breaking point as everything is funneled toward the orbital strike project. There are murmurs of dissent, people questioning whether Yohar's plan is worth the cost, whether they're sacrificing the present for a future that might never come. But these doubts are balanced by the visible progress Ayla's team is making. The slow but steady restoration of systems that once defended Earth from threats beyond the atmosphere. The first successful test of a restored weapons system is a moment of triumph tinged with anxiety. The weapon fires, the targeting systems work, and the test projectile hits its designated coordinates with acceptable accuracy, proving that the concept is viable. But the test also alerts the Ark to what humanity is attempting. Within hours of the test firing, Ark forces launch a major assault on the installation, clearly trying to destroy the restored weapon before it can be used operationally. The defense of the installation becomes another major battle. Raiders and armed civilians fighting side by side to protect the weapon system, while Ayla's team works frantically to bring more systems online and prepare for an actual strike against Ark orbital assets. The fighting is brutal and prolonged, the Ark throwing wave after wave of machines at the defenders, who hold their ground through a combination of desperation, determination, and the advantage of fighting from prepared defensive positions with the heavy weapons recovered from the bunker. The battle lasts for 2 days, with defenders catching sleep in shifts and medical teams performing surgeries in improvised field hospitals, while explosions shake the walls around them. Multiple times it seems like the Ark will break through the defenses, but each time the raiders find a way to plug the gap, throwing themselves into breaches in the defensive line, using improvised explosives when ammunition runs low, and even resorting to hand-to-hand combat with damaged Ark units that penetrate into the installation's interior spaces. The cost in lives is horrific. Nearly 40% of the defenders are killed or seriously wounded, but they hold long enough for Ayla to declare the weapons systems ready for operational use, giving humanity its first real chance to strike at the source of the invasion rather than just its ground forces. The decision to fire on Ark orbital assets is made quickly. Everyone understands that the Ark will continue assaulting the installation until it's destroyed, so the weapons must be used now or not at all. Chen's network analysis has identified what he believes is the primary Ark command ship in orbit, a massive vessel that appears to coordinate all Ark operations on Earth and serves as the hub for the machine's communications network. Destroying it won't end the invasion, but it should cause massive disruption to Ark operations, and might even force the machines to withdraw, or at least pause their activities while they establish new command infrastructure. The targeting calculations are complex. Orbital mechanics and atmospheric conditions affecting the trajectory of weapons designed for precision strikes across hundreds of kilometers of space. But Ayla's team has done the math and believes they can achieve a hit if the Ark don't move their command ship before the weapons can fire. The countdown to launch is tense, everyone in the installation knowing that this moment represents everything they've fought for. That success could change the entire course of the war, and failure will likely mean the Ark destroy the weapons and kill everyone present in retaliation. The weapons fire in sequence, multiple systems launching their payloads toward the calculated position of the Ark command ship, the installation shaking with each launch as years of accumulated hope and desperation are converted into kinetic energy and sent screaming toward orbit. The wait for confirmation is agonizing. It takes minutes for the projectiles to reach their target and longer still to determine whether they hit, the defenders watching their sensors and scanning the sky for any sign of what happened. The first indication of success comes from Chen's network monitoring. He detects massive disruption in Ark communications, systems going offline or switching to backup protocols, suggesting that something significant happened to their command infrastructure. Then, visual confirmation arrives. Multiple explosions visible in orbit even in daylight, debris falling from the sky in burning streaks that light up the atmosphere. The Ark command ship has been hit, possibly destroyed, and the effect on ground-based Ark forces is immediate and dramatic. Machines across the region stop their coordinated assault on the installation and begin behaving erratically, some continuing to fight but without apparent strategy, others simply shutting down or wandering away from the battle. A few even attacking other Ark units as their command protocols collapse into chaos. The defenders watch in amazement as their impossible plan actually works, as the enemy that has dominated Earth for years suddenly falters and loses cohesion, proving that the Ark can be hurt, that humanity can strike back in ways that matter. The celebration is brief because everyone knows this victory is partial and temporary. The Ark will eventually restore their command infrastructure and resume operations, possibly with even greater aggression as retaliation for this attack. But for now, for this moment, humanity has proven that they're not helpless, that they can fight back effectively, that the war is not yet lost. The strategic situation changes dramatically in the aftermath of the orbital strike. Ark operations across a wide area are disrupted, their terraforming slows significantly, and human settlements find themselves with breathing room they haven't had since the invasion began. The Allied settlements use this window to consolidate their positions, evacuating communities from areas that were becoming untenable due to Ark activity, pooling resources to strengthen key defensive positions, and accelerating research into Ark technology now that they have more time to study captured systems without constant pressure from machine attacks. But there's also awareness that this respite won't last. Intelligence suggests that the Ark are already working to establish new command infrastructure, possibly bringing additional ships from wherever they came from to replace what was destroyed. And when they do resume full operations, they'll likely be even more determined to eliminate human resistance that has proven capable of threatening their orbital assets. This creates urgency to make the most of the current advantage, to accomplish as much as possible before the Ark recover and counterattack with renewed force. Yohar uses the breathing room to address internal issues that were neglected during the push to achieve orbital strike capability, repairing equipment, restocking supplies, and giving raiders time to rest and recover from the brutal pace of recent operations. He also takes time to deal with his own exhaustion and grief, finally accepting that he needs to step back slightly from the relentless pace he's been maintaining if he's going to remain effective as a leader. The conversation where Ayla confronts him about this is quiet and private. She tells him that Sable's death wasn't his fault, that people choose to raid knowing the risks, and that destroying himself won't honor her memory or help the people who depend on his leadership. Yohar doesn't fully accept these arguments, but he allows himself to acknowledge his limits, to delegate more responsibilities to other leaders, and to occasionally rest instead of working until collapse. The change is subtle but noticeable. He's still driven and still carries the weight of command, but he's no longer actively punishing himself, no longer treating every moment not spent working as a betrayal of those who died. Ayla, meanwhile, has achieved something she's been pursuing since the invasion destroyed her research facility. She struck a real blow against the Ark, hurt them in a way that matters, and while the satisfaction is real, it's not the healing she hoped it would be. Revenge doesn't undo loss or make grief disappear. It just proves that fighting back is possible, which is something, but not everything. She continues her research with undiminished intensity, but with slightly different motivation. no longer driven purely by need for vengeance, but by genuine scientific curiosity about the Ark and determination to understand them well enough to find additional vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Her work takes new directions as she studies debris from the destroyed command ship that fell to Earth, analyzing Ark technology that's far more advanced than anything previously available to human researchers. The discoveries are both exciting and disturbing. The command ship systems operate on principles that human science barely understands, suggesting that the Ark's creators, whether they're still directing the machines or the Ark, are autonomous, possess knowledge far beyond what humanity achieved even at its pre-invasion peak. Some of the technology seems almost impossible. Power generation systems with no apparent fuel source, computing substrates that function at quantum levels beyond human ability to replicate, and materials with properties that violate what researchers thought were fundamental limitations of physics. These discoveries force Ayla to confront the possibility that humanity might never truly understand the Ark, that the technological gap is so vast that even with access to their systems, humans lack the foundational knowledge to comprehend how those systems work. But she refuses to let this realization discourage her team, instead framing it as a challenge and an opportunity, arguing that even if they can't fully understand Ark technology, they can still learn to use it, to exploit its functions even without comprehending its principles, the way ancient humans used fire long before understanding combustion chemistry. This pragmatic approach yields results. Ayla's team begins developing hybrid systems that combine Ark components with human engineering, creating tools and weapons that are more effective than anything either technology could produce alone. The process is trial and error. Many experiments fail spectacularly, but the successes are significant enough to justify the effort and the risk. One particularly promising line of research involves the Ark's power generation technology. If it can be adapted for human use, it could solve the energy problems that have plagued settlements since the invasion, providing reliable electricity without fuel requirements, enabling manufacturing and technology that are currently impossible due to power limitations. The implications extend beyond immediate survival to long-term rebuilding. With sufficient power, settlements could operate advanced medical equipment, maintain climate control systems, run educational facilities with computers and digital libraries, essentially recreating aspects of pre-invasion civilization that have been lost due to lack of infrastructure. The research is difficult and dangerous. Ark power systems weren't designed with human safety in mind, and several accidents result in injuries and deaths among the researchers, but the potential benefits drive continued work despite these setbacks. The Ark's recovery from the orbital strike is faster than humanity hoped. Within weeks, new command infrastructure becomes operational, and machine forces begin showing signs of renewed coordination. Not quite at pre-strike levels, but enough to end the period of disruption and force human settlements back onto defensive footing. The renewed Ark operations show evidence of adaptation. The machines are being more cautious about exposing command units to attack, distributing command functions across multiple platforms instead of concentrating them in single vulnerable targets, making future orbital strikes potentially less effective even if humanity can execute them. This adaptation demonstrates that the Ark learn from their defeats just as humans do, making each engagement a teaching opportunity for both sides and ensuring that tactics that work once might not work again. The arms race between human innovation and Ark adaptation continues, each side evolving in response to the other's actions, creating a dynamic conflict where neither can achieve permanent advantage through any single victory. The story's focus shifts somewhat during this period, moving from large set-piece battles to a more distributed narrative, showing resistance efforts across multiple settlements and different types of operations. Some raiders focus on intelligence gathering, tracking Ark movements, and trying to identify patterns that might reveal vulnerabilities or predict machine activities. Others conduct hit-and-run attacks on Ark facilities, disrupting their operations and slowing terraforming efforts, even though these small-scale raids can't inflict decisive damage. Still others work on infrastructure projects within human settlements, building defenses, expanding food production, and creating the support systems that allow the resistance to sustain itself over the long term. This broader perspective shows that resistance isn't just about combat, but about maintaining human society and civilization in the face of constant pressure to simply survive at any cost. The children growing up in the settlements during this period know no other world than one dominated by the Ark. Their entire lives have been shaped by the invasion and the constant struggle against the machines. Yet they're still children with all the resilience and adaptability that implies. The game shows glimpses of these young people learning raiding skills alongside normal education, practicing with weapons while also studying history and science, growing up simultaneously as soldiers and as students preparing for a future that might never come. Their existence represents both hope and tragedy. Hope, because humanity continues to reproduce and raise the next generation despite everything. Tragedy, because these children will never experience the peaceful world their parents remember and might not live to see one if the war continues indefinitely. Some young people like Sable was embrace the fighter's life eagerly, seeing raiding as their purpose and the Ark as enemies to be destroyed, while others resent having violence thrust upon them and dream of a world where they could pursue other interests and ambitions. These different reactions to their circumstances add nuance to the story's portrayal of growing up in wartime, acknowledging that not everyone responds to trauma and danger in the same way, that some people become harder and more aggressive, while others become more withdrawn or focused on preserving whatever normalcy they can create. The adults struggle with how to raise children in this environment, what values to teach, when survival often requires moral compromises, how to prepare young people for the dangers they'll face, while also trying to preserve their capacity for joy and hope and all the things that make life worth living beyond mere existence. These questions don't have easy answers, and different communities arrive at different approaches, some prioritizing military training and practical survival skills, others focusing on education and culture preservation, even at the cost of possibly being less prepared for combat. The Buried City tries to balance both priorities, running schools where children learn mathematics and literature, alongside weapons handling and tactical awareness, trying to prepare them for both fighting the Ark and potentially rebuilding civilization if humanity somehow survives. The teachers in these schools carry a heavy burden, knowing that the children they educate today might be dead tomorrow, trying to give them knowledge and skills that might prove useless if the Ark win, but that could be invaluable if somehow humans prevail. The story doesn't resolve the tension between these different priorities, but presents them honestly, showing adults doing their best with impossible choices and children adapting to circumstances they didn't choose and shouldn't have to endure. One of the more interesting character arcs during this period involves one of the soldiers from the bunker, a woman named Torres who was a career military officer before the invasion and has struggled to find her place in the post-invasion world, where rank and regulations mean little compared to practical skills and proven reliability. Torres initially tries to impose military discipline and structure on raiding operations, insisting on proper chains of command and formal planning procedures. And while some of her suggestions improve operational effectiveness, others create friction with raiders who are used to more flexible and improvisational approaches. The conflict between Torres's by-the-book military mindset and the raiders' adapt-or-die pragmatism creates interesting tensions that force both sides to examine their assumptions and methods. Gradually, Torres learns to appreciate the raiders' flexibility and creativity, while the raiders benefit from the discipline and systematic thinking she brings to operations, creating a synthesis that combines the best aspects of both approaches. Torres becomes particularly close with a group of younger raiders who remind her of soldiers she commanded before the invasion, and she takes on a mentoring role that helps her find new purpose beyond the military career that ended when the Ark destroyed her world. Her relationship with these young fighters is complicated. She cares about them deeply, but also pushes them hard, demanding excellence and discipline because she knows that sloppiness and carelessness get people killed in combat. And she's already lost too many people to accept preventable deaths among those under her guidance. The young raiders respond to her leadership with a mixture of respect and occasional resentment. They appreciate her experience and the skills she teaches them, but sometimes chafe under expectations that feel unrealistic given the improvised nature of resistance operations. One raid in particular tests Torres's approach and forces her to confront the limitations of traditional military thinking when applied to asymmetric warfare against an enemy that doesn't follow conventional rules. The mission is a straightforward salvage operation, targeting an Ark supply depot, Intelligence suggests light security and valuable components that could be recovered with minimal risk. Exactly the kind of operation that should succeed if executed properly according to established tactical principles. Torres plans the raid meticulously, assigning roles, establishing contingencies, and briefing the team on exactly how the operation should proceed from insertion to extraction. But the raid goes wrong almost immediately. The Ark's security presence is far heavier than intelligence indicated, and the team finds themselves pinned down by machine fire with their planned extraction route cut off and casualties mounting. Torres tries to adapt the plan, calling for disciplined fire and movement to break contact and withdraw, but the Ark aren't cooperating with tactical expectations. They're not behaving like a human military force would. They're swarming from multiple directions simultaneously, ignoring casualties and coordinating in ways that make traditional small unit tactics ineffective. The young raiders recognize this and start improvising, using Ark technology against the machines in creative ways that weren't part of the plan. Exploiting environmental features Torres hadn't considered tactically relevant, and generally abandoning the structured approach in favor of chaotic adaptation to moment-by-moment circumstances. Torres watches her carefully constructed plan disintegrate into what looks like complete disorder. Her instinct is to reassert control and force the team back into disciplined execution. But something stops her. Maybe recognition that the raiders' improvisation is actually working where her tactics failed. Or maybe just trust in the people she's been training to know what they're doing even when it doesn't match her expectations. She makes the difficult choice to let go of her plan and follow the raiders' lead, supporting their improvised tactics instead of trying to impose structure on chaos that won't accept structure. The team escapes with their salvage and no fatalities, though several raiders are wounded, and the operation is far messier than Torres would have preferred. But it succeeds where rigid adherence to her original plan would likely have resulted in complete disaster. The after-action discussion is intense. Torres struggling with the realization that her military training, everything she spent her career learning and teaching, might not be adequate for fighting the Ark. That improvisation and chaos might be more effective than discipline and planning when facing an enemy this alien and unpredictable. The young raiders try to reassure her that her training still matters, that discipline and planning create the foundation that makes successful improvisation possible, that what they did during the raid worked because she taught them the fundamentals well enough that they could deviate from the plan intelligently rather than just panicking and making random choices. This conversation represents a turning point for Torres. She stops trying to make post-invasion warfare conform to pre-invasion military doctrine, and instead starts thinking about how to integrate her knowledge with the raiders' hard-won experience fighting the Ark, creating a hybrid approach that combines structure with flexibility, planning with adaptability, discipline with creativity. Her evolution as a leader becomes a model for other aspects of human resistance, showing that survival requires letting go of old assumptions while retaining valuable knowledge, adapting to new realities without abandoning everything that worked in the past. The settlement's growing cooperation creates new challenges around governance and resource allocation, when each community was isolated and self-sufficient. Decisions were relatively simple. Local leaders did what they thought best for their own people and lived with the consequences. But coordinated resistance requires shared decision-making about priorities and resource distribution, which means different communities with different needs and perspectives trying to agree on common strategies. The alliance structure that emerges is informal and often frustrating. No one wants to create a formal government or hierarchy that might replicate the bureaucratic problems of pre-invasion political systems. But purely consensus-based decision-making proves impractical when rapid responses are needed, and diverse communities can't agree quickly on controversial questions. The solution that gradually develops is a council system, where each settlement sends representatives to discuss strategy and coordinate operations, with decisions made by majority vote, but with individual communities retaining the right to opt out of specific initiatives if they have serious objections. This system is imperfect and sometimes slow, but it preserves both cooperation and autonomy, allowing settlements to work together without surrendering their independence completely. Yoha represents the buried city on this council. and the experience gives him new appreciation for the complexity of leadership at scales beyond a single community. Suddenly, he has to consider not just what's best for his own people, but what serves the broader human interest. And these priorities don't always align neatly. He finds himself arguing positions he's not entirely sure he believes in, advocating for compromises that leave everyone partly dissatisfied, and occasionally making deals that trade short-term costs for long-term benefits in ways that are difficult to explain to people focused on immediate survival. The political aspects of resistance prove almost as challenging as the military ones, and Yoha learns that building human unity requires different skills than leading raids. Patience rather than decisiveness, persuasion rather than command, willingness to listen, and compromise rather than just making decisions and expecting others to follow. Kira proves particularly skilled at this aspect of leadership. She has a talent for finding common ground between opposing positions and crafting solutions that address multiple concerns simultaneously. And she gradually becomes the de facto leader of the alliance, despite having no formal authority beyond representing her own settlement. Her leadership style complements Yoha's perfectly, where he tends toward direct action and clear decisions. She excels at building consensus and managing relationships. Together, they form an effective partnership that holds the alliance together through numerous tensions and disagreements that could have fractured it. Their working relationship is professional and mutually respectful, marked by frank conversations where they challenge each other's assumptions and push back against proposals they think are flawed, creating a dynamic where both leaders make better decisions because they have someone they trust to provide honest feedback and alternative perspectives. The other council members come to rely on Yoha and Kira to mediate disputes and broker compromises, and this informal leadership structure becomes increasingly formalized over time as the alliance develops shared institutions and coordinated planning processes. The question of what happens if humanity actually defeats the Ark comes up occasionally in council discussions, usually late at night when exhaustion lowers defenses, and people allow themselves to think beyond immediate survival to longer-term possibilities. What would victory even look like? And what would humans do with it if they achieved it? Would they try to rebuild the world as it was before the invasion, recreating the nations and governments and economic systems that existed previously? Or would they create something new, learning from past mistakes and building different structures better suited to post-invasion realities? These discussions are mostly theoretical. Everyone knows that defeating the Ark completely is unlikely, bordering on impossible. But they serve important purposes anyway. They help people articulate their values and priorities. They create shared visions of what people are fighting for beyond mere survival. And they remind everyone that the goal isn't just to outlast the Ark, but to preserve and eventually restore human civilization in some form. The visions that emerge from these conversations are diverse. Some people want to restore technology and industry to pre-invasion levels as quickly as possible, believing that human advancement and comfort depend on recreating the material prosperity that existed before. Others argue for simpler, more sustainable approaches, pointing out that pre-invasion civilizations' resource consumption and environmental impact made Earth vulnerable in ways that the Ark exploited, suggesting that rebuilding should prioritize sustainability and harmony with the planet over maximizing production and consumption. Still others focus on social and political structures, wanting to ensure that whatever emerges from the war is more just and equitable than what existed before, that the shared sacrifice and cooperation necessary for survival during the resistance creates foundations for better human societies afterward. These different visions sometimes create friction, but they also demonstrate the diversity of human thought and the fact that people can fight together for survival while disagreeing profoundly about what should come after survival is secured. The Council generally avoids trying to resolve these disagreements definitively, recognizing that it's premature to make binding decisions about post-war reconstruction when the war itself is far from won. Instead, they focus on maintaining the alliance and coordinating current operations while allowing different communities to experiment with different approaches to governance and organization, creating a diversity of models that might prove useful in unknown future circumstances. The Ark's terraforming continues despite human resistance, slower than it would be without interference, but still progressing steadily toward making Earth uninhabitable for humans. Ayla's research team tracks this progression carefully, monitoring atmospheric composition changes, temperature shifts, and the spread of the crystalline growths that seem to be transforming the planet's ecosystem at a fundamental level. The data is grim. Even with all the disruption human raids have caused to Ark operations, the terraforming will reach critical thresholds within decades rather than centuries, meaning humanity doesn't have unlimited time to figure out how to defeat the Ark or drive them away. This timeline creates pressure to escalate resistance efforts and take bigger risks in hopes of achieving decisive results before the planet becomes completely hostile to human life. Some researchers suggest that instead of trying to stop the terraforming, humanity should focus on adapting to it, developing technology that would allow humans to survive in the environment the Ark are creating, essentially evolving to match the new conditions rather than fighting to preserve the old ones. This proposal is controversial. Many people find it abhorrent to suggest adapting to the enemy's changes rather than resisting them, feeling like it represents surrender or collaboration with the Ark's destruction of Earth as humans know it. But the researchers argue that survival should be the priority regardless of what that survival looks like, that human civilization can persist even in radically changed conditions if people are willing to adapt, and that refusing to consider adaptation out of attachment to Earth's current state is potentially condemning humanity to extinction when alternatives might exist. The debate touches on deep questions about identity and what it means to be human, whether humanity is defined by biological capabilities that require specific environmental conditions, or whether it's something more abstract that can persist across radical physical changes. Ayla finds herself torn on this question. As a scientist, she sees the logic in exploring adaptation as a survival strategy, but emotionally she rebels against the idea of accepting the Ark's transformation of her world. The planet where she was born and where billions of humans lived before the invasion deserves to be defended and restored, not abandoned in favor of accommodation with alien machines. Her research continues to focus on understanding and disrupting Ark terraforming rather than adapting to it. But she doesn't dismiss the adaptation researchers entirely, instead encouraging them to continue their work in parallel, reasoning that humanity's best chance lies in pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously rather than committing everything to a single approach that might fail. The diversity of research directions creates some inefficiency as resources are spread across multiple projects instead of concentrated on a single priority. But it also creates resilience. If one approach proves impossible or fails to yield results, others might still succeed, ensuring that some progress is made even if the preferred path forward turns out to be blocked. This pragmatic approach to research reflects the broader philosophy that guides human resistance. Don't assume any single plan will work, maintain flexibility, and pursue multiple options. Accept that efficiency is less important than resilience when facing an enemy that can exploit rigid strategies. The personal toll of prolonged resistance becomes increasingly visible as months stretch into years. Many raiders show signs of accumulated trauma, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, intrusive memories of combat and losses, difficulty forming or maintaining relationships because of fear that anyone they care about might die on the next raid. The settlements lack mental health professionals and therapeutic resources that might help people process these experiences in healthy ways, so people cope however they can, some through dark humor and deliberate emotional distance, others through intense focus on work or training that leaves no time for reflection, a few through self-destructive behaviors that temporarily relieve psychological pain while creating other problems. The community tries to support its traumatized members informally, raiders looking out for each other, recognizing warning signs of breakdown, and intervening when someone seems to be losing their grip on functionality or safety. These informal support networks aren't perfect replacements for professional mental health care, but they're what's available, and they do prevent some of the worst outcomes, catching people before they completely collapse and helping them find ways to continue functioning even while carrying heavy psychological burdens. The culture that develops around trauma and coping is notably different from pre-invasion norms. There's less stigma around admitting fear or grief or psychological struggle, because everyone understands that these are normal responses to abnormal circumstances, that experiencing trauma doesn't mean someone is weak or broken, just that they're human, and humans aren't designed to endure constant life-threatening danger without psychological impact. This cultural shift toward openness about mental health struggles is one of the few positive changes to emerge from the war, replacing pre-invasion attitudes that often treated psychological problems as shameful secrets with a more honest and compassionate approach that recognizes trauma as an inevitable consequence of violence and loss.